So every few years I do a list of the worst things I've ever reviewed, and you can see the other two lists in the description below. Now we're not looking at stuff that's just bad, like the Emoji Movie, or Car 54 Where Are You, or The Biggest Fan. No. Those may be objectively awful, but they didn't piss me off. This list is specifically for the things that just infuriated me. And really the only rules is I have to have given it a full review. So those things from the, Best and Worst Picture winners, they count. Director filmographies, they count. But nothing from lists or riffs, stuff like that. And this will be covering everything I did post that Lauren Southern video. So like, Car 54 Where Are You? Through that. And just like the last two times, I will say something nice about everything on this list. So here we go. These are the top 10 worst things I've reviewed. Part 3. Number 10. Girl Trouble. Believe it or not, this is not only the only Kids Are Smarter Than This subject on here, but the only episode of anything overall. Everything else is a movie, or at least classified as a movie. And even then, it was a tough pick between this and Miracle in Toyland, but the fact that Hey Arnold is one of my favorite shows gives it a bit of an edge. This episode is just freaking mean, and plays into a lot of unfair stereotypes. The whole Helga bullying Arnold thing was already one of my least favorite aspects of the show. I don't like when boys do it to girls, I don't like it when girls do it to boys, it's just unfair. And yeah, I know kids are complicated, and some of them do that when they like someone, but, well, one, I think they just do it because they copy it from TV, but also, most of the time they're just trying to be mean because they're bullies. However, in most episodes, it's at least kept in check. I mean, it's stupid and cruel, but Arnold's the type of guy who's able to brush it off. This episode just turns her into a freaking tyrant. She completely takes control of the project, yells at him, humiliates him, glues stuff to him, spills paint on him. Like, I get that Helga had a shitty home life and that's what makes her character work, but this does not excuse that. And then the end, Arnold fights back in a pretty realistic way. I mean, he doesn't plan out some big revenge scheme. I mean, she spilled it on him, he instinctively spills some on her, and he's the one who gets in trouble. And then he decides he better apologize, and she yells at him. It's mean, it's contrived, I fucking hate this episode. There is still some of that Hey Arnold charm, like some good atmosphere and a few decent laughs, but I'd probably put this in the top 5 worst episodes I've reviewed for Kids Are Smarter Than This.
Hey, look! Arnold's a bird! We're dancing like we're dumb.
Number 9. Cop Out. Yep, after 3 of these, one of the films from my director retrospectives finally make it on here. And oddly, the one that makes it on here is one by the director who has written all of his movies except for this one. This movie could have just been an unfunny comedy and been whatever, but it also has to be one of the most annoying films of like the past 15 years. I could not stand any of these characters. Sean William Scott, the entire time he's on screen, I just wanted him to get hit by a truck. Every time he talks, I just wanted to punch him in the face. His parkour shtick feels 5 years out of date, and he's just a complete idiot. Tracy Morgan, who does try and has by far the best arc of the movie, is also really annoying, and Willis just looks bored, and because his arc is what is carrying most of the movie, I start to notice these little contrivances that go on, like the fact that if Willis had not gone to that card shop on that day, then the entire plot would never have happened. I mean, normally I don't notice stuff like that. I mean, all movies have it, but here it's hard not to. The action is really badly directed and edited. I mean, I don't think Smith is a bad action director. His lower budget movies have had some action scenes that were pretty good. But here I was just bored, and that's the biggest problem. It is so fucking boring. And there is no reason this needed to be an R. I mean, this has to be the tamest R-rated movie I've ever seen.
Hey, guard! Hey, guard! You know? Guard!
We're dancing like we're dumb.
Number 8. My Scene Goes Hollywood, the movie. This didn't need to be as bad as it was. I mean, I know I'm not in the intended audience, but I've seen plenty of movies where I was not the intended audience, but can still say they were better than this piece of shit. This movie is lazy. Lazy, 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 lazy. The animation is stiff. The characters look more like dolls than the dolls they're based on. And they try and incorporate 3D elements that never look good. The characters are all one note with personality traits that barely come into play. Like, Delancey likes food, but that's just treated as a joke. Madison's love of riding horses comes up like once. The boys have no personality. I mean, maybe in the other specials they do, but here they're pretty much the same character. And the characters are just mean and spiteful. Ryan's a fucking tool who changes from the perfect guy to a complete douchebag in a second. And it's not even like a good fantasy movie, because it's like, if I were a little girl watching this, I wouldn't want to see the girls fight throughout like the second half of it. And the first half, it's like, okay, I get the fantasy Hollywood aspect, but it's just a bunch of montages with scenes dragged out way longer than they needed to be. When they finally do pick a plot, it's the generic one of the crew falls in with the popular people and starts to fall out with the others plot. The voice acting's good and the music's kind of fun, but overall the movie just gave me the same anger I had towards Popstar. It's just the fact that they were trying to sell this to little kids when it clearly had just no passion, no really big effort put in. It's just a quick cash grab. And then to have Harvey Weinstein cameo near the end, it just was the cherry on top. This feels like one of those movies people should be talking about more. Like, if you have a reviewer who you think would make a good review of this, please send it to them, because it gives you plenty of material.
I wonder if I should leak my name to the media. The city's probably sick of being curious, right?
We're dancing like we're done.
Number 7.
Dum, dum, dum.
Atlas Shrugged Part 2. This is actually the only thing from 2018 on the list. I'll defend to the day I die that this is better than the first movie. It's better made, better acted, and it actually has some energy. They seem like they were actually trying to improve. That said, it's still terrible. I absolutely hate every single one of these characters. They are terrible people, and yet I'm supposed to sympathize with them. I'll give them credit for at least trying to give Dagny a little bit more likability, but Reardon is such a dick. That courtroom scene is one of the worst scenes I've ever witnessed in a movie. If I wanted to make a scene to just show how evil a person is, I would do something like that, but then like the producers or something would come back and be like, come on dude, this is too stereotypically evil. Like, this is cartoonishly evil. And he's one of the good guys. From what I get, objectivism is like the polar opposite of communism, whereas communism is working together to create good for all. Objectivism is working on yourself to create good for yourself, and that will create good for everyone else, I guess. We can go on and on about which is better and which is worse and the merits of all. I mean, I don't think either of them is exactly great. Even Dennis Prager has said that objectivism is stupid. The way these movies portray objectivism, it just makes you seem like a selfish dick. Besides that, it's very distracting to have all of the actors replaced from the first movie, and the villains are the dumbest villains I've ever seen. They seem like they were trying to fail. I mean, I just lived through 4 years of a Donald Trump presidency, and even that wasn't as dumb as the government in this movie. A revolution would have happened within days. They got poor Haas Delgado and Burt Gummer and Carrie Martin in on this too. It may be better than the first, but it is still one of the most infuriating movies I have ever seen.
If their fair share demands that I get nothing for my labors, that it requires me to be a victim, then I say, public good be damned, I'll have no part of it.
We're dancing like we're
Number
done.
6.
Dum, 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 dum.
Hillary's America, the secret history of the Democratic Party. I have a pretty high tolerance towards political propaganda. I've become so desensitized with the alt-right and PragerU videos that most of it doesn't really anger me anymore, but for some reason this piece of shit managed to really get under my skin. I think the biggest problem is not what is being said, but how it's being said. D'Souza's voice is so condescending, and he is so sure of himself, saying these things that he has to know are obviously false. He's kind of like that internet troll who says things in just the way to piss you off for the rest of the day. And the sad thing is, I don't disagree with everything he says. I don't think Obama was that great a president. I do think Hillary was a terrible candidate. But my reasons for those are different than his. The secret history of the Democratic Party is not a secret if you know anything about American history. And he generalizes everyone to the left of him, which is basically everyone from like right-leaning libertarians to freaking communists, so much that you all basically believe the same shit. And it's not even well made either. I mean, even with my low self-esteem, I know that I could make something better than this shit. The acting is bad, the dialogue's bad, the framing is bad. It's a terrible movie that makes a few decent points and has some nice music. But stuff like this isn't meant to change your mind. It's not trying to get you to vote Republican, it just wants you to hate Democrats. It's modern political discourse in movie form, and now you don't even need to watch it. It's completely irrelevant because it was made for one moment in time. Summer 2016. And no one wants to go back to that time.
Why do you volunteer here?
Well, because I love people. And the Democratic Party has a long history of loving people and caring for the poor and the needy.
Number 5. Harry Potter, Witchcraft Repackaged. So we go from political propaganda to religious propaganda. This one I probably was less angry watching than Hillary's America because it's just so much dumber, but at least Hillary's America, I believe that D'Souza knows something about the subject he's talking about. He knows enough about politics to lie about it. I do not believe that these people have ever even touched a Harry Potter book, not even the summaries on the back. They get so many things wrong that anyone who has read them, not even like a super fan, just someone who has read the books could point out their flaws. When I sat down to watch this, I thought it was just gonna be like them saying humans practicing magic goes against God, but they can't even do that. They just have to make shit up. Like saying the scar was purposely put on Harry's forehead. They couldn't even get the main villain's name right. And you know what? Forget the books. They can't even get real life shit correct. They don't know what J.K. Rowling studied in college. So many things are wrong, and they think kids are so stupid that they can't tell the difference between fiction and reality. And then they'll condemn stuff the bad guy does, but say that the books are saying it's A-okay that they're doing this. It's like, no, Voldemort drank unicorn blood and possessed people. That's bad. He's the bad guy. It's not condoning his actions. But I may have been able to handle all of that if it wasn't so fucking boring. It's an hour of listening to a dull British woman speak over the same graphics. It's nothing. They'll just play a 5-minute news clip sometimes, and just like, that's not good documentary filmmaking. And for a movie supposedly about how children are being indoctrinated, it brings up a lot of stuff made for teens and adults. Like, I've never seen The Craft, but I know enough about it to know that the examples they bring up are bullshit. This is a terrible expose that didn't really have much purpose in 2001. It is completely useless now except to watch ironically and laugh at, and it's not even that great at that. Positives, the graphics are nice and they're good speakers. That's all I got.
Possessed by Baltimore's spirit, murdering on Halloween. And there's nothing wrong with Harry Potter.
Number 4. Atlas Shrugged Part 3. It's worse than the second, slightly better than the first due to actually having some color and energy, but ends this god-awful trilogy on a whimper, standing as one of the most pathetic theatrical movies I've ever seen. Moving on.
Be back, you son of a bitch!
Number 3. Movie 43. I fucking hate this movie. I would actually consider this the second worst theatrical movie of the 2010s, only beat by Atlas Shrugged Part 1. This is one of the worst comedies I've ever seen. Not just because the jokes aren't funny, I can handle that. It's that most of the time, the jokes aren't even trying to be funny, and instead are just trying to piss you off. This kind of humor seems to be dying down, but in the late 2000s through the mid-2010s, there was just this kind of shock humor that was a lot of places where they didn't actually try to have jokes and were just trying to shock the audience by saying and doing offensive shit. Let's make racist jokes where the punchline is, this is racist. Yeah, that's not a joke. Let's shove boobs and balls in the audience's faces. Let's have lots of swearing. Let's have two parents sexually, physically, and emotionally abuse their kid. Movies like this is why I was so nice to Disaster Movie, because even though it wasn't very funny, I at least believe that Freeberg and Seltzer thought they were funny. There are a couple of decent jokes that only work because they got some good actors, but some of them don't even make sense. And it's such a huge waste of talent. You got all these great directors and actors, and you have them give us this shit, sometimes literally. I hate that this movie exists. I hate that future generations may watch it ironically and may actually find it funny. No, It's not funny ironically, it's not funny genuinely, it's a piece of shit that will either infuriate you or bore you.
Dropped your books, fuckface. We're dancing like we're done.
Number 2. One Missed Call. This movie is pathetic. Easily one of the worst horror movies I have ever seen. Not because it has the worst stuff, but because it has pretty much nothing good. If I have to stretch, some of the atmosphere is okay, and I like some of the ideas it has, but those are probably stolen from the original film. But besides that, this movie just fails in every conceivable way. It is never scary. Not once was I ever scared. Not once was my heart racing. It is just boring throughout the entire thing. I have seen cartoons made for children that are more frightening than this. The editing and pacing are terrible. It feels like it's trying to get itself over with throughout its entire runtime. Characters will die that I don't know a thing about. The direction is lifeless except when it decides to get like over the top with like these weird filtery editing shit. The acting is god-awful, and they all look bored. And it rips off movies like The Ring and Final Destination, except with no good deaths. They all suck with little build-up and are so incredibly obvious that there's no fun to be had. This doesn't even feel like it was made by humans. It feels like it was made by a computer. Like if you fed a computer a bunch of like horror movies and then made it make a horror film, this is probably what you get. This movie doesn't even justify its own reason for existence, and honestly, from what I've seen, it might very well be the worst theatrical movie of the 2000s.
We're dancing like we're done.
Number 1. Balto, the Dingo Pictures movie. I know. Why would you get so angry at a movie like this? It's so cheap and clearly was put out as a quick buck. Getting mad at it just doesn't seem worth it because it doesn't deserve it. And maybe you're right. But if it's hard to sit through, it's hard to sit through. It's repetitive, with absolutely zero character development. It's boring, and has the laziest animation I have ever seen. Yes, you may find Rhapsody Kids or Food Fight more repulsive to look at. They're more creepy, I guess, but at least those had some effort. Like, this is just bad. This is lowest of low animation-wise. The story is dumb. They send 2 dogs to go and get this life-saving medicine that can apparently fit in these 2 little bags. They have to pretty much go non-stop without resting. The editing is a nightmare. There are points where it'll just straight up glitch. The voice acting is god-awful. I mean, they all sound bored, and some of them mess up their lines. You can barely hear them sometimes. Sound effects are just missing. It's a mess, and they sold this, I think. I mean, it was packaged with a game, but I don't care. Spending any money on this is a joke. One of the characters dies, and I'm supposed to care, even though he was an asshole and never got a redemption. The only positive I can think of is that under the right circumstances, it can be funny. With some friends and drinks, you can enjoy it a little bit. But even then, there are better bad movies to watch with your friends and laugh at. And if its very existence wasn't there to cash in on a super underrated animated movie, I may have forgiven it. But because it is, it ranks right up there with Rapunzel and Newborn Cuties as one of the worst animated things I have ever seen. And that's it. And like I said, I'm not done. I'm not quitting. Hell, I have several planned throughout the rest of the year, and I've already started planning my 10-year anniversary for March. I just really need to slow down, but before I leave this apartment forever, I want to thank you guys for sticking with me. Whether you only watched one of my series, watched every single video I put out, or just watched one here or there, thanks. Maybe I helped you think more critically about the media you watch, but that's not really the reason I started doing this. My main goal has always been to entertain. At the end of the day, I have always considered myself an entertainer, a comedian, a clown, and I hope to continue that, just at a smaller pace. So, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you sometime.